My name is Ruth Martinez. I'm the Vice President of Human Resources for Warner Music Group in Burbank, California. Human Resources is kind of a lot of different things in a company. It's typically the department that people think about when they say, okay, well, I need to hire someone. So it does incorporate staffing. It's also the place that administers employee benefits. It's employee relations and programs. And payroll. We make sure that people get paid. More and more nowadays, though, human resources departments are starting to be more about aligning itself with the business in terms of strategic objectives and how to achieve them through their people. Within the Human Resources Department at Warner Music Group, I head up a sort of sub-department that provides human resources support for some of the labels within Warner Music Group, specifically Warner Brothers Records, Rhino Entertainment, Maverick Records, and Word Entertainment out in Nashville. Human resources teams across different companies are really structured normally in one of two ways. Usually you either have a team of generalists, what we call generalists, where everybody does a little bit of everything for a particular business or group of businesses, and that's the way that our group is set up. So within my team, I have people that might primarily support Warner Brothers or primarily support Rhino, but they do a little bit of everything. So that if someone has an issue with their paycheck, they would handle that. If someone needs to hire a new employee in their department, we would do that. If somebody wants to promote someone within their team, we would work with them on that. So it's not really so much isolated by function on my team. It's more isolated by business unit, really, or label, more than anything. I've worked at other places where human resources people on the team are more by function. So you might go to one person whose job is specifically just to do recruitment and staffing. Someone else's primary responsibility might be to do training and development. So there's really kind of two major ways that departments are set up, and my department at Warner Music Group is set up the first way. Who we hire, generally speaking, are people that really love music, are passionate about music. Depending on the level of the position, we may have certain experience requirements, and depending on how specialized their job is, sometimes those experience requirements are that they have previous experience in the music industry, but not always. A lot of times, especially if we're looking for interns, we're just looking for people that are passionate about music, have an interest in working with music, and the artists are hardworking, and the only thing that they really need to be able to do is to provide a letter of credit from their school stating that they will get school credit for working an internship with us. We also do look favorably upon people that do either extracurricular activities that involve music, like someone if they were maybe a DJ on their college radio station, or if they've worked an internship in the past, or if they worked at a record store, if they've got any sort of things that are sort of related to the industry that we're in, that demonstrates to us that they've taken additional time to really pursue what their passion is, and they're going to bring that passion into the workplace. Yeah, we definitely encourage what we call internal mobility between labels, especially nowadays, because the way we view it in human resources, and I think also just as a company in general, is that, our people are really our valuable assets, and we want to keep people challenged and give them opportunities to learn and grow. Because if we don't do it internally, then some company on the outside is going to do it too, and then we lose that person for good. So at least even if someone's moving from one label to another, it's all Warner Music Group. So, that's something that will still continue to benefit us in one way, shape, or form. So it's something that is important. It's something that, we talk about quite a bit in terms of, so many times within the area of human resources, we talk about recruitment and retention. It's not just getting people in the door, but how do we keep them here? How do we keep them satisfied? How do we keep them motivated? And it's not always about money. A lot of times it's about offering programs like tuition reimbursement if people want to go to school, continue their education, get a certain certification or a degree. School's expensive, so if the company can help with those kinds of programs, those are things that are attractive to people and make them want to stay. This is a two-way street. At the moment, that's what we have right now. So if someone is able to provide a letter of credit from their school stating that they'll get credit for an internship, there's still an interview process, but most departments they're not expecting people to already have any sort of firm basis about the music business because most of our interns are college students. They have to be students to get a letter of credit, obviously. So they just need to really be able to be willing to work hard and learn and be collaborative and learn about the business. The one thing that I would caution people to stay away from is if they are trying to get an internship just to try to get close to an artist, because being an intern is an opportunity for you to learn and get a lot of really great experience, but it's not glamorous by any means. I mean, it's the first step to what will hopefully be a great career for some people, but people have to kind of earn that trust and that opportunity to gain projects and learn more, and a lot of times that will turn into a full-time job if everything works out and they're a hard worker, they do good work for us, and we have openings. Yes, the same human resources department will hire in interns as they hire in executives, as they hire in people that are in the middle part of their career. So it's great to make those connections as an intern because you'll make connections with the HR department that could potentially be hiring you in the future, referring you for any positions that they may think you're a good fit for, etc. Also, in the process of being an intern, you'll make connections within the company with certain executives, with other departments, depending on which department you're in. Like marketing, for instance, touches pretty much every area of a music label. So if you're an intern in that department, you wouldn't just be working with people within your department, potentially. Things that we look for in interns or even potential candidates for entry-level positions are people that have taken the extra step to do more than just sort of the basic coursework in their college major. And sometimes that means, working a campus job. If it's music related, it's better. But also, I look really favorably upon people that maybe have been an RA in their dorm, things that have demonstrated their leadership skills and abilities and a certain level of maturity and responsibility if they're able to balance a course load along with a job. And if it's a job that has any sort of additional responsibility, if it's leading a group of people, if it's mentoring, if it's like they have a lot of summer camp counselor type positions, those are really, really great too, because that shows me that someone has the initiative to take on additional responsibilities and they're able to do that successfully while balancing other things. There's a number of different ways, actually. We get a lot of referrals, but we also do go to internship fairs and job fairs where people can attend, and we usually advertise those pretty heavily on college campuses. And I wouldn't even just say this for our own label, but just in general, company websites are key too, in terms of if you just go to a certain company's website where you're interested in pursuing an internship or a job, that will be where they list all the different opportunities that they may have, including internships, as well as places like varietycareers.com, yourmonster.com, and those are good, but they're more general and they're not so much focused within our industry. There's certain websites that are, Variety Careers is one, entertainmentcareers.com is another. If you are interested in specific areas within the music industry, for instance, New Media uses a lot of more specialized websites for their searches, such as Media Bistro or dice.com. So depending on what your area of interest is, you probably want to hone in on more specific areas or more specific websites that cater to entertainment or music industry jobs, as well as the websites of those music companies themselves. I would say sending a resume cold is a better idea than showing up somewhere, simply because People in the human resources department at music companies in general, as well as executives in the field, are typically our days are filled with meetings and interviews and things that have been scheduled already. So we don't have a lot of free time to meet with someone who we don't know from Adam, really. So a lot of introduction, like a cover letter and a resume, is always a good place to start. You can fax over your resume. Usually that's pretty public information. You can even find it on a website usually if you want to submit a resume or a cover letter for consideration. And that's always the best way to go if you're coming in cold, just to introduce yourself. Okay, let's talk about being successful, because I think that to survive, a lot of it is common sense, really. It's like you do your job, you come to work on time, you're conscientious about your job. But in order to be successful in the music business, and I would say this is true of any business, but particularly in music, it's important to have enthusiasm, but it's important for that enthusiasm to be focused. Many times I see some really great, smart, promising, creative people come through the door that are kind of all over the place. And that's unfortunate, because if they would just be able to focus that energy and really think about asking thoughtful questions, if you are able to, and I know a lot of people here at all different levels are willing to spend time with interns to kind of show them the ropes. But that time is such valuable time that if I were an intern, I would want to make sure that time, that I was really making good use of that time. And if I know that I have a meeting with someone, or if I'm going to go out to lunch with someone or something to try to pick their brain a little bit, I want to think about the questions I want to ask them ahead of time in terms of, how did you get your start in the business? What are some ideas that you have for, that I could branch out into? Like, what are some good places to get a foundation for my career? What are some new directions or new lines of business that you think we might be going into? What do you think is the wave of the future? And doing some research on the internet too, and just talking to other people that might also be interns to get their experience, or relatively new employees. I also think it's a good idea to try to get information on career growth from people who have been in the business a while, because typically a lot of people who have been in the business a while have worked at different labels, so they have the benefit of the experience of knowing, okay, well, this is how we did things at Interscope, and this is how we do things at Warner Brothers, and here's why, and here's the reasons why we've tried this and this doesn't work and this other thing does. So it's great to be able to really get that information from people who have been in the business but in different areas and also at different times of the business. There's obviously different challenges now than there were maybe 20 years ago. Mm-hmm. So talking to people and finding out about their experiences is something that I think every successful person that I can think of has done that. They've been inquisitive, but they've been really focused in how they go after getting that information. I think it depends on the person whether someone having completed college would ultimately affect their success, because I can tell you that we have some executives in pretty high positions that haven't gone to college. And it's more because they themselves have been driven and motivated and wanted to learn and made the relationships. And I think that a college degree can help a lot of people in sort of helping them gain confidence and knowledge to prepare them to do that. But I don't think it's absolutely crucial at all. I mean, certainly there have been people that have been successful without having gone to college. One of them is the professional designation in human resources management that's offered through UCLA Extension. It's a great program. It's 8 classes, a 2-year program, and each class is a class that's a different specialization within human resources. So there's a class on labor law, there's a class on recruitment, there's a class on negotiations and conflict resolution for like employee relations, things like that. So it really gives you an opportunity to learn along with other HR professionals in other industries so it's not just classroom. examples, but you're talking to people that work in other industries, but also in the HR profession about their experiences. Because these classes are taught at night or on Saturdays, you're really taking the classes with other people that are working professionals. The classes are also taught by people that usually are the heads of HR for different businesses that they work in. So they have a day job, and then they teach these classes at night. One of the classes that I took was taught by the head of organizational development, which is also known as training. It's a fancy word for training. For the LA Times. The guy worked at the LA Times. So they work at in different industries, some entertainment-based, some not, but it's a really great way to network with people as well as gain some classroom experience, learn a little bit more about the field, and just be able to exchange ideas with your peers in the industry. Another really great program that is also offered by UCLA Extension is a class in music management. And I believe it's also a series of 8 classes. I took one of them, which was just the beginning basic foundation class in the music industry, getting into the music industry and music management. And the way that class is set up is it's taught by a panel of 3 different instructors who either all currently work in the music business. Actually, they all work in the music business. One works at a label, one works in music management, and one, I believe, works for Billboard magazine. But they've all held various positions within the industry, and they bring in panel members. Like one day they talked about A&R, another day they talked about radio promotion, another day they talked about new media, and they bring in panel members from different labels or different parts of the business to talk to the class and do question and answer sessions about what are the challenges in their particular field. This is my first job in the music industry, but I've always worked in HR. I started in HR kind of by accident. When I was in college, I was a double major, English and psychology. So I was an intern, but at my brother's company, which was an aerospace company. And at the time, honestly, I needed a job, and they were offering paid internships. So there was a human resources department because at that time his company had various different divisions, and each division had its own HR department, and they were looking for an intern. And my brother and I spoke about it, and he said, well, if you're thinking about psychology, there's a big psychology aspect to what HR people do in terms of conflict resolution, problem solving, mediation, and those kinds of things. So that's also a big aspect of what we do. That's what we call employee relations. So I said, okay, I'll try it out. I don't really know what that all really means. I really didn't have any interest in working a so-called corporate job, but I said, I'd figure it out and I'd try it out and see how it went. So I was an intern the summer, actually 2 summers in college. Summer before my junior year and summer before my senior year of college in the HR department doing an internship, and I thought, this isn't so bad. It's kind of interesting to see how human resources policies are developed. What are the sort of the thought processes that go into why we have certain policies that say this or that. Some of it has to do with legal reasons, but not always. Sometimes it's just a matter of policy or what management feels is important or not. So when I graduated college, I was in need of a job, and I started temping as a receptionist for a bank. And I looked at their internal job posting. I was just answering phones there or something. I looked at their internal job posting that they had, and they had an entry-level position in their human resources department. So I thought, well, I have some experience from my internship that I did, and so I'll talk to them about it. I interviewed. It was primarily focused on employment and recruitment part of the department. And so I got the job, and I stayed there for a little while. And then I had the opportunity to go do HR consulting after a couple of years in a more generalist role as opposed to being more focused on employment and recruitment. So that was a good learning opportunity for me. I took that. I learned about the other aspects of the role of human resources. I also went and got a certification from UCLA Extension. It was a 2-year program that my job paid for at the time. And then I had a friend at the time who worked for Disney in their feature animation division. And he said, hey, it's really great working over here. Are you interested in maybe thinking about entertainment? And I said, sure. They didn't have any jobs at the time, but I went and I met with them and they gave me an interview. And I stayed in contact with them over the course of about 7 months, and they finally offered me a job working as an employee relations specialist. So that was the conflict resolution, mediation. They are very heavily unionized there, so it was dealing with unions. So that was appealing to me, and I worked there for a few years. But I've always loved music, and music has always been a really big part of my life. So one day I was just kind of surfing the net, not really particularly looking for anything. But whenever you're in human resources, you always kind of browse the job boards just to kind of see what's going on out there, what your competitors are doing, what jobs are posted, what jobs your employees might be looking at, type thing, just to kind of know what's going on out there. And you also see what's being posted in the human resources departments just to see, okay, well, if they're staffing up a lot, they may need to be hiring some recruiters, things like that. And I happened upon a job, and this was when Warner Music Group was still affiliated with AOL Time Warner. So I was on the Time Warner site, and I happened to see a posting for a human resources manager for Rhino Entertainment, which just sounded really great and completely up my alley. And I was like, wow, this seems like a really great opportunity. And I talked to my boss about it. She said, oh, you would be perfect for that job. You should absolutely apply for that job. And I said, well, I'm not unhappy where I am. And she said, no, but it's not about being unhappy. This seems like a great opportunity, almost like it was created for you. You should apply and see what happens. So I did, and one thing led to another, and that's how I ended up in music. So I started off just doing human resources for Rhino Entertainment. As a manager. Then about a year and a half into that, I was promoted to director. And then about a year after that, I was given responsibility for human resources over Warner Brothers Records, Maverick, and Word, in addition to Rhino. And that's when I was promoted to vice president. And at the time that my boss had talked to me about taking on that additional role in those opportunities, I said, you know what, that's really great. I appreciate the vote of confidence, but I need to be able to hire a staff because I can't do it by myself. He agreed, said it was absolutely the right thing to do because we definitely had enough work. And so that's how I ended up leading this small team of people that supports all the business units I just described to you. I would rather work nowhere else but in the music industry. I feel like because honestly, and I speak to this a lot, not only with my counterparts in human resources, but also with people I know in finance and IT. And I've spoken to them about the fact that in my field in human resources, I could choose to work any number of places because every industry has a need for human resources, just like every industry has a need for finance people or for IT. So I choose to work here. And I feel very fortunate that they choose me to work here too. So it's very rewarding for me because I could do human resources at a company that makes widgets, and I could probably make more money working someplace else in another industry, but I don't care about that because I just like being in this environment. Creative corporations, regardless of the size, I think, ultimately they're dealing with creative people, whether they're visual artists, whether they're recording artists. And because of the nature of creativity and what inspires creativity and what stifles it, I think the companies that are responsible for creating a creative product, whether it's music or visual media or whatever, they need to approach things in a much more collaborative way with their employees. It needs to be a much more open and communicative environment. It's not about being very strictly policy driven. It's about having a more general sense of values and goals, and really looking to your to your employees to really help you realize that vision and therefore create a product. Having worked at a bank, banks are very regulated. Aerospace is also very regulated, and to a large extent you have the government sort of really dictating what the parameters are with the way you do business in a lot of ways. I think that in creative companies, you almost have to think, you have to constantly think about how you're going to work outside the box in order to be more competitive or better than your competition, right? So that would be, I would say, the major difference between the two types of companies is that when you're working in a more traditional, structured, regulated environment, the types of people that you bring in are coming in for different reasons. They're not necessarily coming in because they want creativity in their jobs, because the reality is that they're probably not going to have very much of it compared to if you've got a company that is responsible for putting out a creatively driven product. You want to bring in people that are going to have the ideas that no one's ever thought about before, because that's what's going to give you a competitive edge. Mm-hmm. AOL Time Warner is obviously a much bigger company than what we are now, because I think, AOL Time Warner was in the hundreds of thousands of employees worldwide, and now we're down to about 4,000 worldwide. I think the biggest difference that everyone has seen is that, we are much more sort of independent and entrepreneurial, because when we were first sold off from Time Warner, we were bought by a group of private investors. We just recently went public, but, ultimately the company is still a much smaller size. So I would say that, from the standpoint of there's much fewer layers, right, to get to the top when you're in a smaller company rather than a large conglomerate international corporation. I think there's pros and cons to both, having come from the music industry and having come from outside the music industry. Outside the music industry has some advantages in that you have a larger perspective on how sort of the world is out there outside of the music industry and outside of its own specific challenges in terms of, when you're tackling an issue or a problem that's not necessarily music industry specific, you have the additional perspective. On the other hand, there's an advantage to having had purely a music industry background because it makes you much more of a specialist. When there are issues that come up that we grapple with that are not really only specific to us, but mostly affecting us, like, for instance, the whole thing with digital downloading and piracy, right? That's not really something that's affecting banking or the insurance industry right now. So if someone came in from one of those industries, they might have some ideas about how to address those, but they wouldn't necessarily have been really working to try to overcome the issue, as maybe someone else might have been if they worked at a different company and has, sort of been living with it for a little while. I don't think it's necessarily pigeonholing if you want to move outside of the music business and all of your prior experiences within the music business, but it kind of depends on what your area of expertise is. For instance, if you are a business affairs person or a finance person or an IT person who's always worked in the music business, that's not going to necessarily be as much of a challenge as someone who has been something that's a little bit more specialized, like an A&R person, for instance, right? Although that could still parlay itself into some different roles, just not a straight translation. An A&R person is a talent person, right? So like an A&R person, if they're looking for qualified talent, they could potentially find themselves in human resources maybe, right? If they wanted to parlay that into a recruitment function, right? Because if you're trying to find talent, develop talent, and assess someone's talent and place them somewhere, that's in a sense a transferable skill. Ultimately, if it is something that's truly so specific to the music industry and it doesn't exist anywhere else, I think it's still possible to transition and change industries and careers, but you just have to be prepared that you're probably going to have to start in a place that's lower than where you're probably leaving in terms of position and probably salary. Well, if you're a music fan, just being around the whole creative process and getting to see artist performances. Sometimes they'll come to the record label and debut their new album, to really just get to know and work around people that love the music as much as you do. If you're a music fan, like, that is just so great and so important. Personally, I've worked at places, even other entertainment companies, but non-music companies, where I've been like the one music freak. And other people are like, oh yeah, I like this person or that person, but they're not really huge music fans. And it's just really great to be around people that can also introduce you to new types of music or new artists that maybe you weren't aware of before. And it really just kind of opens up your world to, an experience that you might never have known about before. And just being around this product that everyone loves so much, I think is a huge perk of working in this environment. Just the product and being around it and going to shows and running into a bunch of people that you see at work, but just outside of the office environment, that's all really great. I think that employees in general have been affected, and not just even in the music industry, by whether it's staff reductions or whatever. I mean, you see a headline in the paper every day that, Motorola just cut 2,000 jobs. And so I don't think it's something that's specific to the music industry. I think it's a general state of the economy that's hitting a lot of different pockets. But yeah, I mean, certainly people are affected. That's just the truth. But I don't think it's an issue that's specific to the music industry at all. We're hiring people, it's not really accurate to say fewer. We're hiring people in more focused and specific areas. Certainly I would say that we're looking at, like, there's probably more staffing in the digital and new media areas, because that's kind of our focus for the future, right? And maybe we're hiring less people in other areas, and I can't even think of where right now. But it's more about more focused hiring. It's certainly not gangbusters, because now it's more like if we staff up, it's for a specific purpose, because it gets expensive to pay people unless they're actually working on something that's going to potentially generate revenue, right? So it's more about really, and that's where really your HR department has to be a little bit more of a business partner with your label heads and your CFOs to think about, okay, well, if we're going to go into a given new line of business, do we currently have the people with the skills, or are they trainable? So that they can take on these additional responsibilities, or do we need to go out and find people that have completely different skills than what we have currently in-house? And how many of them do we need? And at what level? And where do those people work right now? Where can we find them? What websites do they visit? What magazines do they read? Those kinds of things.